Eliot's young model girlfriend is pregnant. She confidently came to the villa to find me. At that time, I was trimming the dew-covered roses I had just picked from the garden. She was touching her swollen belly. Her face was full of pride. She was unaware that she wasn't the first woman trying to force me out. Every time Eliot got tired of someone, it was me, his wife, who stepped in, to give those women a generous settlement and to help him clean up the mess. But this time was different. I silently placed a divorce agreement on Eliot's desk. At that time, there was a new face beside him. She seemed very impatient with my arrival. "Audrey, it's your luck to be with me. Don't go looking for trouble. You want a divorce. Fine. Even if you kneel down and beg me later, don't think you can enter the Harrison family again." He was convinced I wouldn't actually divorce him. Everyone thinks I'm so in love with him that I can't extricate myself, even tolerating his reckless and indulgent behavior. He betrayed me, but this time, I won't endure it any longer, because that white moonlight who resembles him 7 parts has finally returned from abroad. Eliot smirked and decisively signed the divorce agreement. He casually wrapped an arm around the waist of the woman beside him. She immediately smiled. The woman teased, "Eliot, your wife is getting jealous. You should go comfort her. Everyone in New York City knows that your sister-in-law is famously sentimental. A few kind words would fix everything. Besides, if you really get divorced, your Grandpa Harrison definitely won't let you off the hook." The 2 people in the office were playing around without any restraint, making some uncomfortable sounds. I tightened my grip on the divorce agreement with a blank expression. I took a deep breath. She turned around and walked out of the company. I've long since gotten used to it. Haven't I been living like this for all these years? I am the wife chosen for Eliot by Grandpa Harrison. There's nothing special about it. I'm just an orphan. I have no parents and no background, but with my talent and hard work, I have carved out a place for myself in the business world. He has a good personality and strong abilities, just right to manage his playful only grandson. But Eliot has been spoiled since childhood. How could I possibly manage him? He spends money extravagantly. His companions change frequently. Luxury goods and jewelry flow out like water. If I advise him, he'll just scold me. Every time I'm angry, he always casually flatters me. He doesn't even give me gifts. Yet I willingly help him clean up the mess. Because of this, almost everyone in my circle laughs at me. They say I'm the cheapest woman Eliot has ever dated. Just came out of City Hall. I let out a long sigh of relief, but I saw the constant messages popping up on my phone. "Where have you been? Tonight I want to go home for dinner. I want to eat the French cuisine you make. Today it's my fault. I didn't consider your feelings. I'll be with you tonight." So many years have passed. Eliot's insincere lines haven't changed at all. He really is quite a unique person. I didn't reply to his messages. I just turned my phone off and put it on silent. This kind of situation has happened many times before. Every time I come home, what I see is an empty living room and his insincere messages. Eliot always has endless social engagements. He almost never spends the night at home. My heart has long been wounded. It has bled. It has scabbed over. It has formed a thick layer of callus. How could I still care about his insincerity? But I didn't expect that. When I dragged my weary body back to the villa in the middle of the night, I see Eliot sitting there. His expression is serious. It seems like he has been waiting for a long time. He asks me, "Where have you been? Didn't I say I was going home for dinner? Why did you come back so late, Audrey? Don't go too far." He looks at me with a frown. His face is full of impatience and disgust. I feel a tightness in my chest. It's like being pricked by something. I take a deep breath. I try to calm myself down. Yes, Eliot has never liked me. He thinks I'm too stiff, that I don't understand romance. In his eyes, I'm just a gold-digging woman that Grandpa Harrison forced onto him. I remain silent. Eliot sneers in anger. He originally wanted to slam the door and leave. But at the moment he steps out the door, he suddenly stops. I haven't had a chance to react. He quickly walked up to me. In an instant, he hoisted me onto his shoulder. He headed straight for the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. I shouted in surprise, "Eliot, what are you doing?" His actions made me gasp. He forcefully kicked open the door. Roughly, he threw me onto the bed. "If I remember correctly, we have been married for 5 years. We've never done this, have we?" He deliberately ignored the fear and rejection on my face. Without saying a word, he started tearing at my clothes. "Haven't you already married into the Harrison family? So what, isn't it your responsibility to take care of your husband's physical needs?" Eliot is quite skilled in matters of relationships. He skillfully pinned me down on the bed. His warm breath sprayed on my skin. It made me shiver all over. He was right. This is indeed something common between couples. But when it comes to this point, I couldn't help but feel disgusted. He is with other women during the day, but at night he makes a joke out of me. What does this count for? What do I mean to him? What do I really count for? I struggled with all my might. But the physical strength difference between men and women is too great. My resistance only seemed like a provocation to him, until I could no longer bear the discomfort in my body. I slapped him with all my strength. I shouted out of control, "Get away! Don't touch me!" The man who was originally on top of me kissing me suddenly stopped. We looked at each other. I saw my own reflection in his eyes. I was trembling all over. I looked very embarrassed. I said to Eliot, "I'm not one of those women you see outside. You can't treat me like this. What do you actually think of me? I'm the nominal wife. I'm the one who diligently helps him handle troubles. Or am I just someone he can casually command and humiliate? Just a means of venting like those women outside?" While he was in a daze, I quickly wrapped myself in the quilt. My tears kept flowing. My eyes were fixed on him, afraid he would do something to embarrass me again. Sigh. Eliot muttered under his breath. His expression turned gloomy. He turned his head, no longer looking at my embarrassing state. He casually grabbed a shirt and threw it on. He said, "Audrey, you really are something. Grandpa Harrison really found me a chaste woman." Bang. Suddenly, a loud banging on the door echoed in my ears, like a thunderclap. I trembled in fear. I didn't know how long I had been hiding, until my sanity returned. I suddenly rushed to the bathroom. The warm water washed away all my discomfort. I slowly squatted down on the floor, covering my current vulnerability with the sound of water in the bathroom. The entire night, I was in a daze. Perhaps what happened last night affected me significantly. I didn't sleep very soundly. I had many nightmares in a foggy state. I barely woke up until noon the next day. Just after waking up, the ringtone of my phone startled me. I hastily answered the call. The voice on the other end was even more frantic than I was now. "Sister-in-law, that's great. You finally answered the phone. Where are you now? Eliot has had an accident. He's injured quite badly. He's getting stitches at the hospital. He might be disfigured." Hearing this news, I was momentarily stunned. I couldn't think much. I quickly climbed out of bed. I threw on a jacket and rushed out to drive. Where is Eliot? Where did Eliot go? What happened to his face? Will there be scars? Did the doctor say anything? Eliot's friends are all waiting outside the VIP room. They saw me rush into the hospital in a hurry. My eyes are all red. Everyone's expression is different. Some of them are sympathetic. Some are disdainful. Some are contemptuous. Some are surprised. But right now, I don't have the heart to care about these things. Sister-in-law, don't worry. Eliot, sigh. He had too much fun at the nightclub last night because a girl got into a conflict with someone else. In the end, they started fighting. That night at the nightclub, that place isn't our territory. A tough guy didn't pay attention while he was making a move. He hit Eliot on the head with a beer bottle several times. He was rather implicit about it. But anyone in a place like this knows what's going on. With a little thought, it becomes clear. Eliot was too indulgent on someone else's turf last night. He got into trouble. As a result, he got beaten up. In the end, he ended up in the hospital. Maybe my panicked voice sounded particularly helpless. The nurse next to me couldn't help but comfort me. "Ma'am, your husband's condition is not serious. There is no danger to his life. He just has some minor injuries and a slight concussion. He might need a repair surgery later." These comforting words, whether sincere or not, they helped me gradually calm down. When I came to my senses, I realized that I did look a bit disheveled. I was wearing a thin nightgown. I just threw on a loose robe over it. In my haste, I even lost a shoe. I awkwardly nodded. Fortunately, the nurse next to me was kind. She took out her own clothes to lend me in an emergency. I smiled at her gratefully. I haven't even had a chance to drink water. Then I got slapped by the late Grandpa Harrison. Grandpa Harrison is getting old, and he has a bad temper. He was poking that Nanmu cane hard. His eyes were wide with anger. "Didn't I tell you to take good care of Eliot? People like you. Being able to marry into the Harrison family is truly a blessing from your past life. I only asked you to take good care of Eliot, and now you can't even do that. You might as well not do it at all." I was stunned by that slap. Even Eliot's friends were surprised by this unexpected scene. Although when mentioned in the circle, everyone often speaks of me with mockery and jokes, but over the years, all of Eliot's tricky matters, no matter how difficult, I've been the one handling them. Even the company he doesn't care about, I've been managing it diligently. So, even though they mock me for indulging him, but I know in my heart, everything I do is with utmost effort. There is not a hint of negligence. This is the first time I have felt so embarrassed. Not even during the tough days in the orphanage as a child. I have never suffered such humiliation. My tears are about to fall. I lowered my head. I tried hard to hold back my tears. I forced myself to ignore the gazes directed at me. My self-esteem and the little dignity I had left seemed to be ruthlessly trampled by others. It became shattered. I understand. After today, I will be utterly ashamed in this circle. The incident of me being slapped in front of everyone will surely spread throughout New York City until Eliot is discharged from the hospital. Only then will that suffocating, awkward atmosphere ease a little. He looked at the scene before him, with everyone gathered. Although a bit surprised, he still maintained his composure. He first chatted a few words with Grandpa Harrison. The old man laughed happily. Grandpa Harrison smiled symbolically and said a few words. Then he left. Anyone with insight could see the situation. He quickly took his leave in the end. In the vast space, only Eliot and I were left. My anxious heart finally relaxed. I let out a long sigh. At that moment, I remembered the embarrassment from last night. You just ran over like this. Eliot looked at my obviously ill-fitting clothes. He clearly saw my awkwardness and panic. His tense expression relaxed a little. Then he feigned nonchalance and asked. He asked me to push him into the ward. He said he was tired. He needed to rest. My hand was almost squeezed until it bled. It hurt so much that I was about to lose feeling, but I forced myself to endure. Just hold on a little longer. Even if I am trampled underfoot, still treated like a maid and ordered around, endure their condescending commands. This is how it is. You should have gotten used to it by now. My relationship with Eliot isn't very close. Although I am nominally his wife, in reality, we spend less time together than he does with ordinary friends. It's even rarer to just sit quietly together like this. That's very uncommon. Eliot probably feels the atmosphere is a bit awkward, so he took the initiative to explain things to me. I didn't cause any trouble last night. That guy started the insults first. I couldn't stand it and replied a few times. As a result, he got physical. He continued to say, I really didn't act out of line. Believe me, he looked very anxious. He wanted to explain something to me, as I was peeling an apple for him. I became a bit distracted. When I turned my head slightly, he suddenly stopped talking. He asked, What's wrong with your face? Did Grandpa Harrison hit you? Why didn't you tell me, talk to you? I quietly pressed down the furrows of my brows in my surprise. I turned my head to avoid his touch. This kind of thing. It's not the first time. Back when I just married Eliot, I couldn't understand and especially hated his infidelity and recklessness, so I had a few arguments with him. At first, I thought it was no big deal, but later, Grandpa Harrison called me to the old house. He taught me a lesson with the so-called family rules a few times. That's how things slowly became what they are now, he said. The wife of the Harrison family. The foremost thing is to be gentle and obedient. How can you oppose your husband? It will upset my grandson. What good does that do you? If I hadn't personally experienced those so-called family rules, I might not have believed it either. That such things could still happen in modern society. At that time, I had thought about telling my newlywed husband. I hoped to get his help. Let me no longer suffer from those so-called punishments and teachings. But he never has the patience to listen to me until the end. He always leaves in a hurry to hang out with his female friends. Later on, I also gradually let go. I lived like a puppet without anger, as expected. He noticed I wasn't speaking. He just casually added a remark. But Grandpa Harrison is an elder. You really can't contradict him. If the old man hits you, you just have to endure it. Never talk back to him. Don't provoke him. It's fine. I've gotten used to it. A stiff smile unconsciously appeared on my lips. I wasn't even aware of it myself. This mechanical smile hides so much helplessness and heartache. He still wanted to keep asking me, but I changed the subject. My gaze fell on his face wrapped in bandages. I asked, Your face. Is it okay? He seems a bit distracted. The area around his ears is inexplicably slightly red. The doctor said, There might be some damage, even if it's repaired. It won't be quite the same as before. It's okay. Real men are strong. Appearance doesn't matter. Your hand. I hurriedly looked down. I saw my finger that had accidentally been cut. I quickly wiped away the blood that had oozed out. I'm fine. I'm fine. Actually, I shouldn't have been so agitated. It's just a face. It's just a face that looks 70% like his. An old friend has returned, so this face doesn't matter that much anymore. I let out a sigh of relief, but Eliot interpreted my unusual behavior as me deeply loving him but not being good at expressing it. His mouth unconsciously curled up, and he was afraid I'd find out. He quickly suppressed that feeling of delight. He pretended to calm himself and cleared his throat. I want to eat strawberries. You go get some for me. I looked down at the bleeding wound on my hand. I initially wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell him that Grandpa Harrison had arranged for 5 caregivers for him. Sometimes they can take care of it. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I swallowed them back. Forget it. This kind of thing doesn't happen often, does it? Ever since I married him. This invisible torment and disdain. It's not the first time I've encountered this. I should have gotten used to it long ago. In the past, when he drank too much, he would always call me, pretending something had happened. I hurried over, only to find him drunkenly lying next to a young model. He was still laughing with his friends. Look, I knew she would come. She's so foolish, always giving unconditionally. Memories slowly flooded my mind. I picked up the gauze on the bedside table. I pressed it hard against the wound. He softly said hello. It was probably what happened last night that made him particularly angry. So now he wants to humiliate me in this way. Let him vent his dissatisfaction. I've endured it for so many years. Long ago, I no longer care. Eliot wasn't really hurt badly. He was discharged from the hospital in just over half a month. But after he was discharged, he seemed like a different person. He no longer goes out with those friends. Instead, he stays at home every day. If he doesn't see me for half an hour, he gets anxious and starts looking for me everywhere. Really, it's a bit annoying. I bit my tongue and hung up the phone. I took a deep breath. I tried to calm my restless heart. I dealt with the trivial matters that bothered me. Until that day, I stared at the red-marked date on my phone and suddenly felt a sense of relief. The divorce cooling-off period. Finally, I've made it through. Early in the morning, I literally dragged the reluctant Eliot out the door. I didn't expect him to be surprisingly obedient. He even had a smug smile on his face. He occasionally shook his head and swayed. I don't quite understand. I thought this was a symptom of a concussion. When I drove to the entrance of City Hall, I had just parked the car. As I was pulling him towards the service hall, he suddenly knelt on one knee. He took out a large, sparkling diamond ring and handed it to me. Audrey, happy 5th anniversary. I was stunned. The documents in my hand fell all over the ground. Eliot bent down to pick them up. He caught sight of those conspicuous words. Divorce agreement. You want to divorce me. I opened my mouth. Suddenly, I felt a wave of panic and confusion inside. I didn't expect things to turn out this absurd. Eliot's expression was complicated. He was both confused and angry. He suddenly jumped up from the ground. He grabbed my wrist tightly. Audrey, do you really want to divorce me? His shout was particularly loud. I was so scared that my whole body shook. Everyone else in the hall turned to look at his dumbfounded expression. Everyone turned their heads and whispered, "Is this person a bit foolish? My wife wants a divorce. He still doesn't know. Look at his expression. He usually loves to play around. To have a husband like this, it's really hard to bear." Eliot has always been held in high regard. He's never experienced this kind of humiliation. Although he was so angry that his face turned red and his neck thickened, he could only stare at me intently. He kept questioning me fiercely, again and again. Are you sure you want a divorce? What is the reason? Have I not treated you well? After he said this, he also felt his argument was weak. I instinctively let go of my wrist that he had gripped until it turned purple. The injury on my wrist hasn't healed yet. After being gripped like that by him, it hurts a lot. This injury was caused by him going crazy after drinking too much. It was an accident. I'm covering my numb wrist. I almost couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. He is to blame. How can that be considered good? Let's not even mention the disdain and hurt from before. Just the fact that he has those women outside. It makes me feel hopeless. I'm so fed up. I ignored his baseless accusations. I squatted down to pick up the scattered contract on the ground. I flipped to the page where he signed. I held it up for him to see. Eliot, this name was signed by you. No one forced you. The pain in my wrist comes in waves. It makes me feel like the emotions I've suppressed for years are about to break free. These years. I have been enduring you. I've endured for so long. I have been cleaning up all your messes, getting rid of those pregnant mistresses, endure Grandpa Harrison's beatings. You even have to help deal with a pile of messes at the company. Eliot, I'm a person too. I'm not just a tool for you to beat and scold at will. These past 5 years, I've even started showing signs of depression. Indeed, I married someone I don't love, busy every day, and I have to endure ridicule and blame, sometimes even being beaten. Even my daily necessities are strictly controlled, afraid I'll spend even a penny more, that it might affect his family's wealth. This kind of life. It's not how a person should live. Look at my red eyes from anger, shaking all over. Eliot unconsciously stepped towards me. He raised his hand, wanting to wipe away my tears. But in the next second, he saw someone naturally pull me into their arms. "Eliot, stop making a scene." I heard a familiar voice. All the grievances and patience burst out at once. Teardrops flowed down uncontrollably. "Julian." Eliot looked at Julian with a sidelong glance. His tone was full of disdain. He tilted his head, assessing this half-brother who grew up in an orphanage. There was not a shred of respect in his eyes. "You, a person in poor health, dare to come back to the country. Are you not afraid of getting sick again?" He said, "My family matters. You don't need to worry about it. Audrey, come here." But he was surprised to find I actually didn't move at all. I even unconsciously stepped back behind Julian. "So that's how it is. I really didn't expect this. My wife and my biological brother actually got together." He lowered his head, let out a cold laugh. When he raised his head again, his gaze had turned icy. "Audrey, did you not say you wanted a divorce? You better not regret it." Until that red document was handed over to me and Eliot. Only then did my anxious heart finally relax. "Audrey, you know Julian has no inheritance rights. You can't have my heart. So I chose him to be my substitute. Do you think this is interesting?" Eliot wore a look of arrogance. It was as if he had returned to that cynical state of the past. He looked at the sight of Julian standing next to him. With a hint of gloating smile on his lips, he spoke up. "And Julian, you picked up the woman I discarded. What are you so proud of now? A broke substitute. A woman I gave up on. HMPH. What a match made in heaven." He was getting more and more into it. He even started clapping for himself. Eliot thought I would be angry, that I would publicly turn against him for not getting the property and inheritance rights, or even beg him to get back together. However, no one present noticed his sarcasm. "It's been a long time since we last met, Audrey." Julian extended his wrist, revealing the old but well-maintained red string. It was placed together with the one on my wrist. "That is a testament to our bond when we were in the orphanage. Eliot, you are wrong. He is not a substitute. He is my first love." Julian was recognized by the Harrison family when he was 13. I was only 11 at that time. I was young and my health was poor. Julian took care of me all the time. He often secretly saved snacks for me, but Julian's health was not good either. The matron said so. His condition required a lot of money to be treated, but in the orphanage, there weren't enough resources to properly care for a child. Although we were reluctant to let him go, the children in the orphanage were all happy for him, but none of us expected that when we saw Julian again. He has become so frail. He looks very pitiful. The Harrison family has more than one grandson. The most favored is his nominal brother, Eliot. He is the child of the ex-wife. He is not favored at home. He is often bullied by Eliot. I remember that rainy night. We helped him up in the mud and sent him to the orphanage. When we met the director, he asked if he could go back to the orphanage. Julian was covered in injuries because Eliot took his medicine. His illness had flared up several times. He stumbled out of the Harrison family. He found his way to the orphanage by memory. The director's eyes immediately filled with tears, but her capabilities were limited. She couldn't keep this poor child, nor could she compete with a wealthy family like the Harrisons. At that time, I was standing next to the unconscious Julian, feeling his weakness helplessly. From that day on, I started forcing myself to study hard. I asked Dean Mom to help me find many obscure and difficult professional books. I was not even 12 years old at that time. That's when I began to study desperately. I understand. Knowledge is my only way out. Only by mastering useful knowledge can I go further and protect Julian well. Since then, I kept skipping grades. I entered university at 15. At 19, I made my mark in the business world. By the age of 22, I was able to protect Julian with my own abilities and means. At 18, I was with Julian. On the day of our 5th anniversary, I happily went to find him, but I was knocked out by Grandpa Harrison and taken to the old house. Grandpa Harrison told me Julian had been in a coma for 3 days. His illness is very difficult to treat. If he cannot fully recover, he might not live past 30. I made a deal with Grandpa Harrison. I promised to marry Eliot. and he will send Julian to the best medical team abroad for treatment. All these years, even though I have endured grievances and disdain, being forced to give up my own career, I have never regretted it. I will feel sad. I will feel angry. But every time I see that face that resembles Julian by 7 parts, it always reminds me of my lover who is slowly recovering abroad. So, I am just a stand-in for your amusement. Eliot stared intently at the hands I was holding with Julian. His teeth were grinding together, his eyes filled with rage from betrayal. I was somewhat surprised, and I found his sudden emotions a bit amusing. He has enough women outside to form several football teams, if we are talking about betrayal. I am the one who is most hurt. Isn't that right? Julian is indeed a genius. During his treatment abroad, he did not waste any time. Instead, he seized the opportunity, made precise investments. Now, his achievements and wealth are not much less than the Harrison family's. I haven't relaxed over the years either, but Eliot is not a reliable heir. This has made many people see the future dilemma. Many have transferred most of their assets. Eliot spends money extravagantly. This is also one of the main reasons for the decrease in the Harrison family's wealth. I'm back. Audrey, you don't have to worry anymore. I originally thought, from now on, I would have no contact with Eliot. Our divorce was quite unpleasant. Grandpa Harrison even made a harsh statement the day after our divorce. He said he would completely blacklist me in New York City. Unfortunately, it is no longer his era. Julian is making a strong comeback, with my experience supporting him. He is far from being comparable to a declining Harrison family. I didn't expect Eliot to come looking for me. At that time, I had just moved into my newly purchased house. The next morning, I found out he had waited downstairs all night. The hair on his forehead was damp from the dew. There were noticeable dark circles under his eyes. I was a bit stunned. In my impression, he had never looked so exhausted. He grasped my wrist again and quietly asked, "Audrey, you need to be honest with me. In these 5 years, did you really never have even a flicker of affection for me? Not even a tiny bit of feeling? Was there really nothing?" He shouted loudly. "This is truly surprising." Then he paused for a moment, as if he was thinking about something. I looked at him in confusion. I found his question quite ridiculous. My heart was filled with perplexity. Why does he always ask these meaningless things? Is having feelings really that important? Right now, the Harrison family is surrounded on all sides. The Harrison family is now surrounded on all sides. He refuses to deal with the problem. Yet he keeps questioning me about this kind of thing. What's wrong with him? But seeing how persistent he is, I pressed my lips together. Still, I couldn't help but respond. There was, Eliot. I once had feelings for you for 5 years, long and torturous. During the days we couldn't see each other, I looked at this face that resembles Julian's every day. How could there be no sense of touch or emotional transfer? Eliot listened to what I said. His eyes suddenly lit up. He was about to speak. I interrupted him directly. I said, "You're not worth it. You don't deserve my affection. I even feel now, this face of yours that resembles Julian's a bit, is a disrespect to him. Julian would never belittle me to nothing, nor would he treat me as something that could be casually discarded. Having feelings for someone like him, for me, feels more like a shame. Eliot, your behavior makes me feel very uncomfortable. Probably no one has ever expressed their dislike for him so directly and thoroughly." Eliot's expression was like that of an abandoned puppy. He trembled and took a few steps back. It was as if he had grasped a glimmer of hope. He looked up at me. It's okay. You once had feelings for me. This shows that there are still things about me that you like. Right, I apologize to you. Let's start over. I have cut off contact with those women, and I won't go out and mess around anymore. Can you forgive me this time?" He pleaded in a soft voice. His humble attitude reminded me of my past self. He doesn't know my faint feelings for him. Actually, it's not for any other reason, but because his face used to resemble Julian's very much. But now, this face, after plastic surgery, is already different from his. I'm sure I won't develop feelings for someone so morally corrupt and worthless. I immediately broke free from his control. I didn't expect him to suddenly grab a fruit knife. He held it to his own neck. He threatened, "If you don't agree to reconcile, I'll commit suicide right in front of you." Audrey, why are you so heartless? I really know I was wrong. All I'm asking for is a chance. Let me compete fairly with Julian. It's only been half a month. He looks much more haggard, and he's lost quite a bit of weight. Now even the hand holding the knife is shaking. I've gotten used to having you by my side. I've gotten used to your presence. When you suddenly left, I felt like I was missing something. Life no longer feels complete. He smiled bitterly. Tears streamed down. He looked helpless. A life without you by my side? I would rather not. I have never experienced this situation. A man who has lost control of his emotions is holding a knife. I don't know if he will lash out at me. I can only stand rigidly in place, watching him cry and scream in madness until he becomes overly agitated. He suddenly collapses. Only then do I sit on the ground like a deflated balloon. I immediately called the police. In the days that followed, everything returned to calm. Julian's progress was very rapid, or rather, his abilities and insights were exceptionally sharp and powerful. In a short period of time, he had already established a firm footing. He discovered many unspeakable secrets that the Harrison group deliberately concealed. In almost a month, the Harrison family resembled a building about to collapse. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. They were even exposed by several former executives and partners for various improper bribes and deals. Grandpa Harrison and Eliot were taken in for questioning by the police. I was also called in to answer a few questions. I just came out of the police station. The elderly man glared at me with his cloudy eyes as he rushed towards me. He raised his hand high, intending to hit me, but before he could strike, he was stopped by two men. He's getting old. Seeing both of his grandsons stand firmly by my side without hesitation. He was so angry that his eyes bulged. He couldn't catch his breath and fainted. It was obvious. Julian and I were no longer concerned about him, but none of us expected that. Grandpa Harrison would be so extreme. He even wanted to drag us into it. When that large truck came rushing towards me, my mind went blank in an instant. My body reacted faster than my mind. I instinctively pushed Eliot, who was protecting me, away. I stood in front of the speeding truck. "Audrey, get out of the way." I didn't have time to recognize whose voice it was. I only felt my body being violently thrown away. Pain surged through me in an instant. At the moment, the truck grazed my scalp. My blood seems to have frozen. My heart skipped a beat. All that remains is a buzzing sound in my ears. I fell heavily to the ground. My heart is racing like a drum. On the road not far away, there is a bleeding corpse. That is Eliot. "Audrey, are you okay? Why are you so foolish? Why did you stand in front of me to face that car? If something happened to you, what should I do?" Julian ran over. He hugged me tightly. He anxiously checked my injuries, but my gaze never left the person lying under the truck. I don't know if he is dead or alive. His throat felt unbearably dry. He struggled to shout out, "Hurry, call an ambulance quickly, Julian. Quickly dial 120. In the hospital's emergency room, the doctors are trying to save my ex-husband. I've always hated that. A man who often speaks disrespectfully to me suddenly ran over and pushed me away. I looked down at my bloodied hands. My mind was still in chaos. What on earth is going on? I have never understood Eliot. He clearly used to hate me. He didn't think much of me at all. Why would he suddenly rush out to save my life? Could it really be like he said? Has he really fallen in love with me? The red light in the emergency room went out. I immediately stood up, nervously staring at the attending physician as they walked out. My life is temporarily saved. But whether I can continue to live, it's really uncertain. Julian gently touched my ring finger, trying to ease my nervousness. "It will be fine." Julian's words seemed to come true. That night, Eliot really woke up. His eyes were clear. He still has the mood to joke with me, seeing the various bruises on my body. A trace of guilt flashed in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I should have been more careful back then. I remember you were actually quite afraid of pain. I was just too nervous at that time." He smiled so much that his eyes were curved. His gaze was particularly clear. It seemed like the accident made him suddenly understand something. He even had the mood to ask me when I was marrying Julian. "You should pick an auspicious day for your wedding." When we got married, we didn't consult the calendar. I checked a few days ago. That day was actually not suitable for a wedding. He used to hate those fortune-telling and calendar matters the most. Now he's starting to talk about these things too. You say, if we had chosen an auspicious day to get married back then, wouldn't things have turned out differently? His complexion looks particularly good. It's even a bit rosy. I feel something is off. I'm just about to ring the bell to call the doctor. But he stopped me. He said, "Don't move. I just want to talk to you about what's on my mind." He cleared his throat a few times, then he gave me a helpless smile. "I've done so many wrong things in the past. It's my fault for hurting you. If you don't forgive me, it's something I've brought upon myself. The Harrison family has fallen. I don't blame you either." He paused for a moment. Then he reached out to fix my hair on my forehead. He said, There's no need to forgive me, but please remember me." A bit of blood seeped from the corner of Eliot's mouth, but he seemed completely unaware of it. He was just staring intensely at my face. As if he wanted to imprint me deeply in his mind, he said, "You know, actually, I did it on purpose. Actually, I did it on purpose. Look, even if I die now, you will remember me for a lifetime. Even if you don't like me anymore, you will still feel a bit grateful towards me in my life. It's also rare to have one against Julian once." He suddenly began to spit out blood. I hadn't even had time to react, but he grabbed my right hand and put a familiar ring on my ring finger. I can no longer defeat Julian. However, in this lifetime, he can never make me disappear from your heart. Audrey, in the next life, don't encounter someone unreliable like me again. He has already started to babble incoherently. I held back my tears. I nodded vigorously. I trembled as I wiped the blood from his face. He smiled. In the last moment of his life, his eyes reflected my tear-streaked, complex expression until he completely closed his eyes. I looked at that diamond ring, being held in the arms of the hastily arrived Julian for comfort. Only then did they quietly speak the heartfelt words they had never said. "Eliot, you win."